Welcome to Curlis Mania. I'm telling you, what a guest do I have for you today? I mean, come on. Please welcome in the house his first time on the channel, Mr. Eric Porter. How
Thank
are
you,
you,
Tom.
Eric?
Appreciate it. I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's really a pleasure to have you on the channel. I appreciate it.
Me
I
too.
mean,
Thanks.
if you haven't seen Eric, I mean, he's been on the in the prog seat on the Sea of Tranquility channel, and I've like I told him, I said, I feel like I know you, Eric, because I've watched so many of those episodes, and they're just really entertaining, and these guys are really knowledgeable. They really know their stuff. So it's whenever I'm talking Prague, I'm like, and then especially Tull, I was like, I know Eric's a Tull guy. I know it. I know he likes Jethro Tull. So I'm like, I'm gonna
Great.
ask him, and sure enough, he's like, I'm in. So lucky me. So anyway, we are here to talk about again, obviously one of the heavyweights of progressive rock in general, right? Jethro Tull, of course.
Indeed.
And then, we're talking about two late 70s gems from them, Songs from the Wood, yep, versus the next record, Heavy Horses. Oh, and you've got I'm dying, man. I can't find that anywhere.
I got I was late to the game. I've got a few feelers out on songs from the wood, but I did pick this one up right out of the gate. So I've got to get songs from the wood too. But what a great job Stephen Wilson did on these. Fantastic.
Oh, I was gonna say that. I listened to because I've got it on Apple Music,
Yeah,
and you
me
got the
too.
Steven Wilson remix. It sounds Heavy Horses is like awesome. It sounds so good.
Incredible. And I don't know if a lot of people still do it. Um, Highly recommend headphones for these when you're
Yeah,
listening. The
yeah,
headphones it's just incredible. But yeah, he did such a great job on the remixes for these. Fantastic.
yeah. I mean, I because it's funny because I listened. Of course, during this week I was listening to all the different formats. I listened to this, and then I was listening to it in the car, and I was just there was a difference. I mean, Steven
Yeah,
Wilson did a fantastic job. Uh,
agreed.
really, really amazing. So it just sparkles. So anyway, and we're off topic already, but Jethro Tull, I mean, come on, there have done one of the best reissue series of anybody, right? I mean,
Yep,
that's like the gold standard of reissues,
absolutely.
right? Right? I mean, I've got this, I got Benefit.
Okay, I picked that up as well.
Yeah, and I've got it earmarked. I mean, there's a book in here. I mean, you're like reading a
Oh
book.
yeah,
It's awesome. I mean, every album has like a book with it. It's just you can't beat the reissue series for Jethro Tull. But anyway,
no. And I don't know, Tom, if you'd picked up a lot of the older stuff, like the 20th anniversary and then the cigar box set. This
mhm.
band has almost, you hate to say this, but their unreleased material is better than a lot of bands' albums.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a wealth of unreleased material, and they are in these. There's other collections, obviously, but just fantastic stuff all around.
Oh, no, no question, no question. In fact, didn't they just release the Chateau sessions as a
I
separate
believe so.
release?
Yes,
And that's incredible. I mean, that you listen to that and you're like, wow, they ditched these songs? Like, like, wait, what? Like, they didn't put these songs out? Really crazy. I almost think that maybe he just I don't know, it was such a bad experience there that he just kind of felt like he wanted to start over. I don't know.
yeah,
But
strange.
anyway, we're way off topic as we always are, and that's okay. I'm gonna steer it back. I'm steering it back. Here we go. So, what I usually do on these battles is give you a little bit of background. With Jethro Tull, it's going to be difficult. They started in 1968, and it's a long, and they put out an album every single year, right? So, in the 70s, they were on fire. But I will say that the album before, I'm just gonna say the album before Songs from the Wood is Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. 1976, I believe.
I think you're right.
That right?
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
and this was another yet it like kind of like a War Child thing where he was gonna do a stage play. It was another concept. of a for a guy named Ray Lomas, who's a washed up rock star. And I think that Ian used to get, he would get excited and if he had a theme to write to, right? So he would make up these themes a lot, which is understandable. I mean, you and I think it helped him. It kind of helped him to write. So, but this album, for some reason, it didn't really catch on that well. Maybe it was just the changing times. Punk was coming in. It didn't get reviewed very well. It didn't go gold, from what I understand. And it didn't sell as well, or it didn't chart as well as anything since Stand Up, which is a long time ago. So I think that kind of, I don't know, the album just didn't really. I like that. I think there's some great songs on that album, but a lot of people rate it pretty low. What's your take on that, Eric?
It's not one of my favorites, we'll put it that way.
Yeah,
Um, I think 70s Tall, obviously, probably most fans have that favorite sweet spot, whether it's Aqualung, Thick as a Brick, and that section, the albums we're going to talk about. That one's just one I've never really reached for that much. So it's probably low on my list.
it's sort of in that middle ground, like you said. They have that sort of early period that sounds like Cream or something, and then they get into the they get more and more progressive. Then they get super progressive with the, Thick as a Brick, Passion Play, and then they sort of, go back and, a little bit back, and then they change into, they do the whole War Child era, so it kind of goes around, and they have little eras. And then,
Absolutely.
and that leads us into their folk rock trilogy. That's what we're here to talk about. And so I think what happened was, I'm just going to say, to finish the thought, was that I think going into this record they felt like, okay, we got something to prove. The last record didn't do as well as the others. I think he felt a little fired up, and going into this album, that's just my theory. And because this album is just, I mean, I don't want to get too far in, but I don't want to give away the game. But man, Songs from the Wood. Whew. All right. Anyway, I'm going to hand it over to you. What's your take on Songs from the Wood?
Well, I mean, even before we get started, these are probably two of my favorite records. I came to Tull, like most fans, probably where classic rock radio. I'm a guitar player, hearing Martin Barr play Aqualung. You know, you're not associating with progressive so much as you are just being blown away by the song. So those classic rock hits are the ones that probably reeled me in. And then as I started getting into progressive, being that I'd already been a fan, they were probably one of the first bands that I really went deep. And if you told me, here's some folk prog, I don't know that that would have lit me up without having heard these before. Not that I dislike folk, but it probably wouldn't be top on my list. But I got to tell you, with the complexity that these guys put together, and you listen to these songs, and you have that acoustic foundation. You always had the acoustic guitar and the flute with Ian Anderson, so that element was always there. Even Stand Up, you had your folkier tracks, um, but it wasn't a combination that I would have thought. I really think they took it very far. Um, you can hear the foundation of the songs, but yet I have to say John Glasscock and Barrymore Barlow are probably, if not my favorite rock rhythm section, they're right there. Um, these two are absolutely fantastic together. And I did make mention at the beginning when we were talking about listening on headphones, and the stuff that Barrymore Barlow does is not, it's not always that normal, drumming. I mean, he does a lot of percussion in here, very clever stuff when he's playing the kit. And John Glasscock is just a monster. I mean, he's an absolute beast, whether he's playing in unison with Martin Barr or doing his own thing. These two made these records. I mean, they're the secret weapon, I think. As good as the songs are, and obviously you have to give credit to Anderson. In reading the booklets, Tom, it does make mention of the fact that these two albums felt, and I believe Martin Barr and a few of the other guys mentioned it, that it felt more like a group effort than Ian Anderson coming in. And I'm sure he was the catalyst for the songs, but it seems like they all felt more included, whether it's in the writing or the arranging. I know Dee Palmer, um, had a lot to do with some of the arrangements, the orchestral side. But these two albums to me are just, like I said, I don't know that I would have ever, if someone said, hey, here's a really folky prog band, I don't know if that would have lit me up. But listening to these, they absolutely sit at the top of the list for Tull for me. Um, I think the title track of Songs from the Wood, to me, is probably my favorite Tull song. That just has everything. And as you go through this album, you get some of the folkier stuff. I think I like the heavier stuff on Songs from the Woods. Hunting Girl is, or not Hunting Girl, I'm sorry. Um, I think, I'm sorry, Hunting Girl. I'm going back and forth. Hunting Girl to me is absolutely amazing. Uh,
What
Jack
a
of the
riff.
Green,
What a riff.
it is. It's absolutely incredible. Velvet Green's another one that I just think uh, Barrymore Barlow on that one is just a beast. His percussion, everything is perfect in that. But I still like the fact when you listen to these, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, how for as complex as these are, you really do kind of sit back, and if you listen to it, you can hear that. I can almost feel like I can hear Ian Anderson putting these together, sitting in his room, playing acoustic guitar and playing along with these. And then all these arrangements come into these songs and they just kind of expand on that idea and turn them into, I guess, prog folk is kind of the term for it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny that you say that because you talk about, oh, it's a really folky prog record. Do you want to check it out? It's like, nah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound exciting, right?
Right.
But but man, these guys make it exciting, and you're not kidding. That rhythm section, I mean, you
Yeah,
can't ask for anything better than that.
absolutely. Secret weapon for sure.
I mean, like you said, Glasscock is killing it. I mean, and I forgot to mention in my history that, Jeffrey Hammond had left and they had to find a bass player and John Glasscock
Well,
moved in.
he was on Too Old to Rock and Roll, right? I mean,
He
Glatt was,
was, yeah, he
okay, I
was.
think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Hammond left at the end of War Child or I don't know, anyway, or at the end of Minstrel. Sorry, end of
Minstrel,
Minstrel.
okay. Yep.
Um but anyway, yeah, I mean, Barrymore Barlow, I have in my notes. It's like I have his name in like caps everywhere. Barry Barlow. It's like the guy is just killing it through the whole record.
Absolutely.
Oh, I mean, and it's so nimble. Like the guy is like on it, but it's really nimble and all over the place. Um, in the first album he's on, Thick as a Brick, I have a lot of moments on Songs from the Wood that sound to me like Thick as a Brick. Um, so I just, I think this is it's funny. Somebody, I think it was in the prog corner, Scott Lade, he was talking about perfect album sides. And man, side one of Songs from the Wood could be up there.
Absolutely.
I mean, Songs from the Wood, Jack in the Green, I love. It's a great little acoustic track.
Yep.
Cup of Wonder, awesome. I mean, I have so great. Love the opening riff. Chorus is so cool. Reminds me of Thick as a Brick. Pass the cup of crimson wonder. That sound. I don't know. For some reason, that reminds me of like Thick as a Brick
Yeah.
a little bit. I just love that. And the middle section of that's. Oh, I mean, it's so good. And then, Hunting Girl. We just mentioned. What I said, what a riff. I have it. What a riff. Again, reminds me of earlier Tull. This song is a Jethro Tull at their best. Great melody, catchy but complex too. And I have Barry Barlow in caps again. Um, because when he does those, he does all those like right on.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
Well, I think that's the big thing. I mean, you were mentioning kind of the tie-in to Thick as a Brick. I guess you wouldn't think of, and again, it's just being description or a descriptive term, but this does have that folk flavor to it based on the acoustic guitar, but the arrangement in these songs and what they're doing and the back and forth, Glasscock will play a line and then Martin Barr plays a line and Dee Palmer's doing something and you get these vibes or vibraphone going on back I mean, there's just so much, and that's why I was mentioning, if people aren't familiar with these or you haven't listened to them in a long time, get that Steven Wilson remix and go back and listen to these in headphones. Because I do think he brought a lot of stuff in some of the songs. And again, I didn't do a compare, but you kind of hear things like, geez, I don't know that I heard that before. Or I don't, maybe it was lower in the mix and it didn't stand out, but there's some things in the mix on both of these that I think really he kind of, you'd love to be sitting in the studio with him and have all the faders down and have him just kind of playing around and seeing, oh, I'm going to bring this part up a little bit and just hear the difference that it makes. I mean, great stuff to begin with, but I don't know. The arrangements to these tunes absolutely blow me away.
I couldn't agree more, and I have, in my notes, I have it's like a puzzle. It's almost like a puzzle putting together. It's like and like you said, imagine being that's a great point. Like, imagine sitting on the desk and being able to listen to things by themselves. Oh my, that would be
Yeah.
so cool.
I mean, even
Yeah.
the vocal that opens songs from the wood where you just have the voices,
Right.
just hearing that or bringing the faders down and I want to hear this voice. I want to hear the harmony that's put there. Uh, I mean, I'd pay money to be able to sit there and play with that, have the mixer and just be able to bring things up and down. It would be amazing.
That's a good idea. We should try to, like, that could be a business, like, pay to listen to the masters and be able to work the board for an hour, you know?
Exactly.
It'd be cool. So what's your take on side 2? I mean, Velvet Green is a great opener. Great.
Velvet Green to me is a classic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolute classic. And it's funny, when I was listening back to this, The Whistler is almost a song where I feel like, geez, I don't know if I should like this. It's a little too happy or something. I don't know. It
Sort of twee, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit, but you know what? The when I listen to it, I'm like, it's a song that sticks in my head. It's catchy.
Yeah.
You mentioned the catchy melodies and stuff. Um, and it fits. It's not like it doesn't fit into here, but for some reason and I don't feel that way about it, but I listen to it, I'm like, ah, maybe I shouldn't like this one as much as I do, but I think it's a great track.
I know what you mean, though. It's like it's funny because it has that "da da, I'm the whistler,"
Yeah,
and it's kinda like, this is kinda like, and then but I love the verse, man. I love that
yep,
"da da da da." That is such a cool verse,
absolutely.
you know? And then how about Pibrock where, Martin Barr is in the house, right? I mean, it's like
Love that guitar
that
stuff. Yeah,
guitar is like, what is this? Like Black Sabbath in reverse? What is this? Like, it's a cool track. It's a cool riff.
and that's another one. I know you mentioned you were listening on Apple Music. I think he did a little something with that, whether he brought one of the guitars up. I felt like I was getting a little more kind of what was going on, or maybe if he doubled his parts or something.
Mhm.
Um, I just love that intro. I think it's so unique. It's not something you listen to that and it's like, you know, who would have thought to do that? It's just almost like this feedbacking guitar and coming, but it's awesome. It's
That
just great, and that's an exactly.
it's like
And the impact, I think, when the band actually comes in after he's gone through a few bars of that, that makes another impact to the song. It just changes the feel of it. It's dark, like right. That intro is kind of dark almost,
yeah. Yeah, it is.
uh,
Yeah.
but
It's cool. Yeah.
yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah, that's where that's what the thing I liked about Songs from the Wood is that Martin Barr is also in the house. I mean, he's
Yep.
definitely he's like playing, he's got full electric on a couple songs where you're like, okay, Martin's here. I like it. I like it. He's not, whereas in we can get to this later, but Heavy Horses, I feel like things have changed a little bit. But
Okay. Yep.
in that regard. But so that hey, that brings us to the next record. Why don't we just sieg into the next album? Unless you want to have anything more to say about Songs from the Wood.
No, I just what are your favorite tracks? I guess from Songs from the Wood.
Yeesh. I would say, the title track just sets the tone. I mean, as
Yeah.
you mentioned it, it's like, that with that a cappella opening and talk about a really uh complicated arrangement, but it doesn't sound, when you listen to it, it flows.
Yeah,
So that's the magic of Jethro Tull. It's like they're doing like 7/4 and they're doing these weird things and their things are coming in and out, and things are stopping and starting and coming out, coming out, and coming in. But it doesn't, you're like, it's just pure enjoyment from a listening standpoint, right?
absolutely.
And so, but I love songs from the, I mean, I love that. I love Cup of Wonder. I love Hunting Girl. I love Velvet Green. Almost the whole record.
Yeah, we're in pretty much agreement then.
I mean, yeah, it's like, so, and then, Pib, like we were saying, Pibrock, I forgot about how good that was. I
Mhm.
listened to it this week. I was like, oh yeah, I love this track is cool. So yeah, I mean, it's primo Tull. It's just primo Jethro Tull,
Absolutely.
you
And I
know.
think you mentioned how Too Old to Rock and Roll didn't do that well. I think it's kind of a surprise that when you talked about the environment where punk was coming or had hit, I guess. And both of these records, I think US and UK were both top 20, right? So
Yeah.
it really did kind of catch fire in where maybe other bands were kind of sinking a little bit at this time, and you would have thought maybe Tall was on their way out, or in the decline. I guess if like Too Old to Rock and Roll just didn't really seem to connect. It's kind of a surprising combination of influences to come out at that time, and I would think is to be as popular as it was. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, and it's all relative, right? Because Jethro
Yeah,
Tull in the '70s was still very popular. I mean, they were still selling out arenas
right.
and so they were doing well. But I mean, relative terms, it was kind of a failure for them, right? So, um,
Absolutely.
but but I mean, this album, it's just like coming out swinging, and it's just, and it's kind of a new direction, like we talked about. It's a little bit of a new direction. It's sort of this, Ian had moved to the country,
Right.
um, and I forgot to mention this earlier in my history, that he had moved out to the country and he had just gotten remarried or something, I believe.
Correct.
And so he was like sort of new domestic life in this countryside, and somebody at the record company had given him this like book about the pleasures of the forestry or something, or I don't know, the folklore of the woods or something. I don't know what it was, but it's something
Yeah.
like that. And
Yep.
he got kind of inspired by that book. We've, like you mentioned, Jethro Tull's always had a lot of acoustic stuff. Always. I mean,
Yep.
ever from stand up onwards, right? There's acoustic. Ian is an awesome acoustic guitar player, and
Agreed.
but this, to me, he takes it to a different level on this. I don't know. It
Agreed.
feels.
I agree too. I think it runs through, you think of Aqualung and it's that intro is so iconic, and the acoustic guitar is iconic, and but that acoustic guitar seems like it has its place in that song, right? But yet in these
Right.
songs, when you really listen, it's almost like it's running through everything. It's kind of the center of the songs, and yet once the songs get going and you're listening to all this other stuff, you tend not to focus on that, but it's still there.
Yeah.
Um, just yeah,
Yeah.
he's a genius as far as I'm concerned.
He really is. I mean, it's funny. I've gotten more into Tull as I've gotten older. Like, I swear to God, I've always been a fan, but I've gotten more and more into them. And just like you said, I'm really on the genius. That word's thrown around a lot. Ian Anderson is in the picture for that. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. I mean, just the fact that he can crank out that much material. I mean, an album every year, an album tour, album tour, album tour, throughout the '70s, and there's a lot of brilliance in there,
Absolutely.
you know. But and he's the only writer. He's the sole writer. It's not like he's got help.
Right.
Um, So I was gonna say, read this real quick. This will end if maybe this is a good way to end the song from the wood discussion. So I got this book. This is original Jethro Tull by Gary Parker,
Oh,
and
okay. Yep.
it's 1968 to 80, which I thought is a kind of you don't see a lot or hear a lot about, like, I remember looking through the booklet for Living in the Past, and you see all the different, this is pre-internet, right? So you see all the different photos of the band and you're like, that's a different guy. That's a different guy. What album is that? Like, you're like, it's like they changed members so much. Um,
True.
you know, but but anyway, so at the end of they're talking about Songs from the Wood, at the end of the chapter, it says, whether it was the release of the band's breakthrough album, this is kind of long to stay with me for a second. Whether it was the release of the band's breakthrough album, This Was in 1968, the rapturous reception recorded Aqualung in 71, or the triumph of Thick as a Brick in 72, Jethro Tull had certainly experienced its share of peak moments. But 1977, it can be argued, represents a pinnacle never experienced by the group again. Not only had Tull, through the additions of David Palmer and John Glasscock, morphed into a unit of dazzling musical luminosity, they'd also staked out a radically new musical terrain that yielded one of its greatest albums. And perhaps most critically, it was all triggered by a level of synergy rare to Jethro Tull, evident at intervals through 71 and 80, virtually non existent beyond. In that effect yielded a result far greater than the sum of its individual parts. You know?
Yeah, I
I read that and I'm like, that's a pretty damn good synopsis
it
of
really is. And I guess when I, got into these albums, I never realized that they were as popular as they were with the fan base. I mean, you didn't have the internet or as much of the internet as it is now. I figured what was getting played on the, kind of like what everyone would, what was popular on the radio is what drew people in.
Mhm.
And now all these years later, this is a really highly regarded period for the band, and I see why, but it's one of those things where you didn't hear at least I don't remember ever hearing anything on the radio from these two records.
Nothing, nothing. I never heard anything on the radio from these. No, which is interesting. I mean, it really, especially Songs from the Wood, you think it would have been on WNEW or at the back in the day, you think you would have heard it, but
And they may have. I mean, I'm more, I guess, and I don't know how old you are, Tom, but I think when I started listening I was in high school, so it might have been early 80s. So I guess I could have missed, maybe they got played when the album first came out. But in terms of, and we know how classic rock radio likes to repeat itself, there's
right.
really, for the size of this catalog, what do they play? Five Tull songs?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And three from Aqualung.
exactly.
Yeah, so, but yeah, no, I graduated high school in '88.
Okay.
But I remember listening to this album, like, in high school, people were like, "What is this crap? What are you listening to?" Like, it wasn't popular, it wasn't cool to be listening to Songs from the Wood for sure.
Right.
Um, so anyway, all right, cool. So let's jump into Heavy Horses now. So when you think of Heavy Horses, what's your initial feeling about Heavy Horses? What's your initial thought?
Well, I mean, you almost see them as companion pieces. They're
Mhm.
very similar, I think, musically. I think Heavy Horses might be a little darker, um, but Songs from the Wood has that kind of stuff on it too. But they just go together. I mean, same band, right? I think Daryl Way was added, did a little
Right.
violin on a couple of
Yep.
these tracks,
Mhm.
which I think shows maybe Ian was really on that track, right? Because he gets Jobson for A after Stormwatch. So
Right, right,
he
exactly.
must have liked that sound in there. Um, but I think, when I think of these two, it's hard for me to separate them because they're very similar to me. I love them both.
Right.
Um, I think it's kind of funny because I think when I read about this one, this is when I think Heavy Horses was recorded in the studio that Ian Anderson built versus um, when I was going back, and I'm trying to remember if I have the timing right. So you had mentioned how he moved out to the country, and I'd heard they hired a mobile unit to do some recording out where he lived, but he'd also put this studio together in London, I believe. So the band, this was the first time they weren't recording in um, one of the normal studios that they went to. I think Morgan Sound or something like that was the one that they were using.
Yes,
But
Morgan Studios. Yep, yep,
Morgan
yep,
Studios, okay.
yep.
But for this one, these are so close, Tom, that it's like picking your favorite kid, maybe, right? And I
Yeah,
wonder
it's
how
tough.
he feels about them both. But
Yeah, it's
again,
tough.
I think Mouse Police Never Sleep, great opener, kind of funny. Like I think it's a song about his cat.
Right, right. Yeah.
right? But it's kind of cool.
Mhm,
Killer opening. And again, I think with this one, it's kind of a rocker, but you hear that acoustic foundation through it.
mhm.
Um, Acres Wild is amazing. That's one of the tunes that features Daryl Way.
Yeah,
Um, and No Lullaby probably is one of my favorite tracks from this one.
yeah.
And it doesn't seem like that's one that's well known or discussed, but I think this is one that has everything. It's complex, it's melodic, there's a tons of change throughout. I love the intro, that the section where he's the come out fighting. It's just a
Mhm.
great lick, and it seems to kick harder and heavier as the song goes along.
Yeah, it does, it does. Yep.
One of the interesting things when I was reading from the book, because I wanted to go back and just kind of read through this when we were going to discuss it, Moths, which is probably the folkiest song on this, Martin Barr and Dee Palmer both listed as their favorite track on the record.
I love it.
Uh,
I love it. Yeah, yeah.
and I think that's most probably close to the roots of the album, right? That one doesn't, I think Palmer does some nice arrangements in that, but it kind of stays more acoustic, where the other songs seem to integrate. You get the acoustic side, you get the heavier electric side.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
Journeyman, what a great bass from Glasscock in that one. I love the tone on that. It's kind of a slinky, I don't even know. It's just, and then that one gets tricky. That's another one where Barrymore just knocks it out of the park. Um, and then I think, we're talking about such similar records. I think if I was to, I would say Mouse Police, the title, again, these two title tracks, um, I don't know. I mean, I love the title track for Heavy Horses as well.
Yeah,
Um,
Heavy Horses is like the epic on this one, right?
if you ever change from album battles to song battles, those are two great ones to put up against each
That
other.
would be tough, that would be tough.
Um, but I think No Lullaby, Heavy Horses, Mouse Police are probably my three favorites. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I mean, just this band, like we talked about, the rhythm section just being that secret sauce for these two albums. And I know, people throw Stormwatch into this. For me, I get why Stormwatch is kind of mentioned in the trilogy, but it's to me it's a little more off from these two. I think these two are really aligned well. Um, and
I agree with
I
you.
can't
Yeah.
see someone liking Songs from the Wood and not liking Heavy Horses.
Right.
Uh, they're that it's and like you said, it's more of a period for them. They Tull changed a lot throughout the course of their career, always sounding like Tull, but definitely different periods. But
Mhm.
what do you say, Tom? It's another and you think about these, they're a year apart from each other. And you think about, and again, I don't want to get into what's not on the album, but if people are out there and they decide to, kind of go for these, when you hear the unreleased tracks, you're sitting there going, how did they decide what to put on the album, what to leave off?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you're talking about a year's time or 2 years' time where the songs were written, and he's written probably 4 albums worth of material
Yeah,
and
yeah, some of the
released
extra
two.
songs on Heavy Horses are great.
Absolutely.
I mean, Living in These Hard Times is one of them. I love
Mhm.
that track.
Yep.
Like,
Same thing. How do you decide, right? How did
yeah.
he say, this, and I'm sure if you talk to him, there'd be one little thing like, this part annoyed me or I didn't like this. So, and I know
Right,
we're
right.
whatever 40 years out, but these songs may not have seen the light of day. You never know. How many bands have stuff that's kind of just put in the vaults, and we're lucky in this age, I think, with CDs and everything else, that a lot of these bands are doing this where they remaster and then they release, a bunch of their unreleased tracks. But sometimes you listen to those once or twice, you're like, yeah, that was kind of cool. But these, I'm listening to them like this could have been a double album easy.
Yeah, yeah, no, I had the same feeling because I was as we talked about earlier, I was listening to the Steven Wilson mix, on Apple Music, and it just continues. It doesn't say, like, end of album, it just continues, right? So it goes into the bonus tracks, and you can barely tell they're bonus, they sound
Yeah,
like the album tracks.
they're terrific,
You're
definitely.
like, "Where did the album end? I can't I oh, yeah." to go back. Oh yeah, Weathercock was the last song. Okay, that's the
Yes.
real album. That's the end of the official release album. Um, so yeah, so it's funny. Um, this is where we differ a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of Mouse Police.
Okay.
And that kind of turned me off of the record for a while. Like I remember when I was younger listening to this, I was like, Mouse Police, what? Mouse Police never, what? Like I just that lead off track for some reason kind of threw me off.
Well,
I don't
an
know why.
opener is important. If an opener doesn't hit you, that can,
It can
kind of
mess you up.
influence. Yeah.
Yes. It could totally mess you up, right? And now as a older gentleman with more refined tastes, I still don't love that song. However, and I still think that in my opinion, this is just my opinion, right? That you could have started the album with Acres Wild.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. You could have, because Acres Wild is a great song, and I think you could have started it, and it kind of is a uh, perfect sort of like you said, it really kind of is part two of Songs from the Wood, but it's it, I don't know how to describe it. It's a little folkier almost. It's almost like
Yeah.
there's like I always say Martin Barr is a little bit missing MIA. I mean, okay, there's no lullaby, but even that I feel like could rock a little harder. But I think Ian, I going in probably said, look, this is going to be a folky record. We're not going to do a lot of electric stuff on this. That's the vibe I get on the album. Like it's
Okay.
like, okay, there you can hear him playing electric, but it feels like the amps in another room or something.
Yes. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't have like the really heavy like Martin thing you get sometimes.
And the sequencing, you were mentioning about that sequencing is obviously important in an album. So, like you're saying, maybe Acres Wild would have been a better opener, at least for you and what you're hearing. And that happens a lot. You see, I'm sure they spend a lot of time trying to figure out, because I'm always one where I think with these two records, like Fires at Midnight, I usually like something to close with a bang, but I thought Fires at Midnight for Songs from the Wood was pretty appropriate to close the record.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. Yeah. Yep. Yep. I felt that way too when I listened to Songs from the Wood. I was like, oh yeah, this is a mellow closer, but it kind of works. Yeah.
yeah, it does.
Um, but yeah, I mean, but man, the one I really enjoyed preparing for this. I'm gonna say that. Okay, I really enjoyed it because especially Heavy Horses, because I always had in my mind that Songs from the Wood was way better than Heavy Horses. That is not the case. Not and this week really woke me up to that. And especially we talked about that Steven Wilson mix. There is something about what he did to that. He sparkled it up, man. Those
Yeah,
acoustics are just sparkling and it sounds so good. And things like Moths, I just absolutely love Moths. I Journeyman is a great, like you said, John Glasscock just killing it all over
yeah,
this album. The bass is unbelievable throughout this whole record,
agreed.
you know? And if you ever doubted John Glasscock, listen to this album closely. Um, and then things like One Brown Mouse, I think is just beautiful, just an
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful melody. It kind of gets me. Like you listen to it, you're like, oh, this is. But that maybe that was it. It was like two songs about mice. I mean, I was like, "Okay, I can do one."
yeah, going over the top.
No, but at the same time, right? I'm okay with All in the Mouse's Night by Genesis. I love that track. So
There you go. Okay.
some people hate that track. I love it. So, anyway, uh, but yeah, Heavy Horses. I mean, that's just the epic of the record. And then Weathercock is a great closer. Talk about closer. Oh,
Agreed.
great song. What a great to close the record. I mean, it's just such a beautiful album. It's very well done. And I agree with you that Stormwatch doesn't quite live up to these albums. I don't know why, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it never did to me. I get why it's kind of put in with this trilogy, but to me, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's its own thing, but I don't think it, you know, I would give these 1 and 1A. Stormwatch is maybe a little further down the road. Maybe
Yeah.
just not as realized as these two are.
Yeah. Stormwatch also that was when John got sick, right? So he wasn't
Yes.
part there was I think
Yeah, I don't know if he might be on a track or two. I can't remember, but I don't think he's on the entire record.
yeah. and I love your take about, like, I don't think I would have loved a like folky rock album, but and things like Acres Wild, where I have on my notes, I have it almost sounds like Irish dancing at one point, like with the flute and the mandolin, you
Oh
know?
yeah,
Dun, 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 dun. It's like, I don't know, it's just like you're like, "Oh, this sounds like Irish dancing or something," but it's cool. It's
it
really
works.
cool. It works, and also, oh, the other thing I was gonna say before I forget, and that is have you do you notice a little difference in vocal too? Like a little gruffer vocal from Ian on Heavy Horses? I mean, it's
You know,
never, but
I think and I wish I could remember, but as I was going through the booklet, I do think that I remembered them saying that. I don't want to say this was the beginning because I think it was more the 80s when he was really having the vocal problems. But
Mhm.
I do remember them saying something about his voice, whether it was the heavy touring they did or whatever, that when they went into the studio for this, that, you know, there was a little rasp or more growl to his voice than I guess what he'd had before. So there definitely was a mention of that, Tom. I just for some reason I can't bring it back up, but I agree with you that the vocals are a little more gravelly, I guess maybe
Yeah,
that's the
that's
word
the way
for
to
it.
say it, gravelly, yeah. Yeah. That's what I noticed as well. Like just a little bit, not a lot. I mean, not enough to be
Right.
like a problem, but it was like between if you compare the two vocally, it's like, oh, he seems like he's much more on form on the previous record.
Agreed.
Um, but Ian's a great singer. What am I talking about?
Yes.
He's a great singer, you know. And like you said, think about it. He'd been touring album tour since 1968. So it's gonna start to take it a toll a little bit,
Absolutely.
you know. I mean, when you play live, you gotta scream. You're hitting your top of your voice all the time.
Working hard for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree with you. I think that you're right that a lot of this album was recorded at his home studio. Whereas I think the previous one was done a lot at Morgan,
Yep.
which they had recorded Aqualung at and all those albums, classic records. So but yeah, I just yeah, this it's like you said, it's it's like part 1 and part 2. Um, so what are your closing thoughts on Heavy Horses? What would you say if you had to
I again, I think this period for me is absolutely my favorite of the band. I don't think they've ever had, and this is not to diminish any of the players. Like you said, I mean, Ian is he's the writer, he's the main guy. But this to me was the best band he ever had, best band he ever put together, best band on record. I just think I wish there'd been more. Um, I kind of get where, you know, the evolution of the band, you have to keep changing, you kept morphing. I'm sure if they'd put, and maybe that's where Stormwatch, we kind of lose it a little bit, right? Okay, you had these
yeah.
two, this one's trying, might not be there. And then they kind of moved on, and A got a little more, I think, with bringing Eddie Jobson in, got that maybe a little more electric sound. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but they kind of pushed the folk, off to the side again.
Mhm.
Um, so it's hard because there's so many this band and just has so much great music. But really, I mean, this is the sweet spot for me. Um, so with Heavy Horses, I think, and I know when we come down to the conclusion, we have to pick a favorite, but um, just two great. I mean, they've done it before, right? I mean, but just two classic albums for me back to back, and that doesn't happen often. I mean,
No,
there was a
no.
magic here that you can't just reproduce. You can't replace two guys or whatever and say, hey, it's the same band. It's not. And I know
No,
Ian's the writer, but
no.
they worked stuff out in the studio, right? Things changed. He brought stuff in. I'm sure he took ideas, um, the band's input. I don't think he wrote those bass lines because when you hear the albums that Ian Anderson played bass on, they're not John Glasscock bass lines.
No, no. And
So
you don't find a drummer like Barry Barlow very
no,
often either.
absolutely not.
So the
So
fact that you said this band is incredible.
it is.
Yeah. It's incredible. And it's just I think that they did have, you reminded me to mention that I think they had more a little bit I read this somewhere that they had a little bit more of a free hand on Songs from the Wood, like, he would bring in the skeleton of the song and say, "Okay, you guys help me with the arrangement,"
Yeah,
you know?
because I think, and I know when you read about him today, there's a, I saw Tull, God, I want to say it might have been 2 years ago. Um, it's just not the same without Martin Barr. And I know it was really Ian and Martin, and the band has changed hundreds of times over the
Right.
course. Um,
Right.
and I didn't want to miss them. You don't know when the last time you're going to get to see, Ian Anderson come around, but
No.
it just wasn't the same. And um, I saw Martin Barr probably maybe a year prior at a little club, and he did obviously mostly Tull stuff, and it was terrific. But you just miss the magic of those two together.
Now you're missing the other piece. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, I don't know. Like I said, with all the classic material they have and the great albums they have, these are always the two I reach for, and I don't seem to get tired of them. I enjoyed this assignment because it wasn't just throwing the record on and listening to it once. I mean, I listened to these a bunch of times for this, and
Mhm.
I don't get tired of this. I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't really have a problem listening to these over and over again.
Exactly.
I I didn't have an issue with it. In fact, like I said, Heavy Horses really grew in my estimation. It grew a lot.
That's awesome.
So I'm really happy that, like, I got another Tull album that I love. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that I love this so much.
Yeah, they're terrific. And I know I mentioned this before, but if you can get your hand on these, because you get I'm sure you've seen the Madison Square Garden clips. This band really produced these live very well.
Yeah.
These are not easy songs to play.
No, no, not at all.
They were great live band too.
Yeah, I think there's a reason they were selling out arenas all the time because they were so good live, you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
not to obviously get off the subject, we've enjoyed talking about Tull, so we've done that.
yeah,
There is an expanded edition of Bursting Out that's going to be coming out, and there's a
I
lot of
saw
this
that.
stuff on here. So
Mhm. I saw that and I was psyched. I mean, it looks like it's like three
yeah,
CDs or something.
yeah,
Yeah. Because Bursting Out is already good, and wait, God, maybe even more songs. All right, bring it on.
absolutely.
But yeah, I've got, like I showed you earlier, I do have Benefit, and these are just these reissues. Just I bought, I did find Songs from the Wood actually at a decent price. And
Oh,
I just ordered it. I was hoping it would come in for this episode so I could be like, "Yeah, look,"
yeah, you
but
can hold it up, right?
it didn't come in time. Come on, Amazon. I don't think it was Amazon, it was something else. Anyway, but I was excited to see it for a decent price. I mean,
Yeah,
anytime I see those, I snatch them up.
you gotta.
And I
Yeah,
don't know
and I
why.
won't let them slip by again. I made that
I
mistake.
was sleeping when they first came out. I must have been asleep.
Me too.
What the hell happened? Why didn't I snatch them up when they came out? I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking. But anyway, so I guess we're at that moment of truth now.
Oh
So
yeah,
we gotta, this is where I get, I get my guests and I'm like, hey man, I know this is hard, but you gotta pick one out of the two.
it's the point, right?
This is the point of no return, as Kansas would say. We got
All
these
right,
two classics to choose from. So if you had to choose, which one would it be, Eric?
I'm going Songs from the Wood.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And I'm doing the same.
Doing the same.
I mean, this is unstoppable. This album is just like
Absolutely.
it's literally a five-star album. I mean, it's just like amazing.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. It would definitely be a 5 star, and Heavy Horses is not far behind.
No, it's
It
not.
really isn't.
It's not. It's really not. And in fact, like I said, going in, I thought, oh, Songs for the Woods gonna blow it away. And I'm like, oh, it was closer than I thought.
I like hearing that though. I mean, it's not, you're obviously a fan. You love this band, and
Mhm.
just going back and listening to this a few times, right? It changed some of your opinions about some of the album, and now it's kind of elevated for you.
Oh,
So
for
that's
sure.
awesome.
For sure. No question about it. Yeah, so, I'm excited about it.
Cool.
And,
I like it.
yeah, so we'll see. We'll see, we're gonna have to do some more battles. If you're enjoying this, Eric, we'll have to do this again.
Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, man. All right, well, thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate you coming on the channel and just talking Jethro Tull with me for 45 minutes straight.
No problem.
I'm
Always
sure it's
fun.
not I'm sure it's not that hard for you though, because it's one of your favorite bands.
Always fun. Thanks for
Oh,
having me. I appreciate it.
oh, you're very welcome, and like I said, we'll do this again if you're into it and interested. We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. I hope you appreciate it. I hope you like this episode. If you're a Jethro Tull fan, how could you not? Come on. So, and always hit that like and subscribe button. I always have to say that. I almost forget. So, yeah, it helps the channel. So thanks again. Thanks to my guest Eric. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Curless Mania.